Human rights groups are speaking up after an outspoken Kenyan national found himself charged and jailed in the Middle East after calling out labor rights issues. Earlier this month, authorities in Qatar released 28-year-old Malcolm Bidali, who blogged about the inhumane conditions for migrant workers in the nation. Just days after making an online presentation exposing the harsh realities faced by migrant workers in Qatar, authorities arrested and detained Bidali, who wrote under the alias Noah for migrantrights.org, while working as a security guard in Qatar. For 3 weeks, Bidali was in solitary confinement and without legal representation before being accused of taking foreign money to spread disinformation. Although released, Bidali is still facing serious charges. Joining me now to further break down this story is Irũngũ Houghton. He is the Executive Director of Amnesty International, Kenya. Thank you so much for joining me, my brother.
Thank you very much, Mark. I really enjoyed the interview with Cameron.
Thank you. What can you tell us about what led to the detainment of Malcolm Bidali?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, many of your viewers will probably be familiar with the case of the Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, who was assassinated in Istanbul, Turkey. But many of the viewers are not yet, I suspect, really present to this serious problem that Qatar has with respecting labor rights as well as the right to expression. As you've mentioned, Malcolm Bidali, he's a Kenyan. He's about 28 years of age. He's been in Qatar as a expatriate security worker for several years now. But on May the 5th, he was basically abducted, I would say, and disappeared really for 3 weeks, where he was held in solitary confinement. And it took really a great degree of international pressure for him to be released three weeks later. What we know about him is that he migrated essentially to fill an employment gap in the area of security. He's part of the many people who go into Qatar either as security officers or construction workers. As we know, the FIFA World Cup is coming to Qatar in a year or so from now. Or they go there as domestic workers. And he is an advocate for the rights of workers. And what we're hearing now is that essentially he has been arrested and is now facing charges. Although he has been released, he still has to face charges essentially of a security nature, is what the government is referring to them. As Amnesty International, we have been watching very closely workers' conditions in Qatar.
Talk to me about those conditions.
Sure.
Talk to me about those conditions, because
So we have a bit of a delay here, Mark. The migrant conditions are notoriously exploitative. Many cases, Kenyans who migrate to the Qatar monarchy have to spend somewhere in the range of about $1,400 just in agency fees, facilitation fees, for them to get to the kingdom. Many of them work in 19th century working conditions. You can have 9 workers in double-decker bunks in rooms that are between 4 to 5 meters squared. Many people have died, particularly construction workers, because of the very warm, very hot conditions that they have to work in without proper health insurance. And we've seen something like 6,500 workers die in recent years. And if you're a domestic worker, it's not any better. You may be working in a house, but sexual abuse and rape, unfortunately, are the common experience of many of the domestic workers who are there. There have been some reforms in the last few years, but really we've not seen the shift that would leave the United Nations or the international labor organizations, or for that matter, Amnesty International, confident that people who migrate to the kingdom migrate and have their rights respected.
The last time, and I traveled to the Gulf and to Qatar in particular sometimes, and I remember the two things I was struck by in Qatar was that as I navigated taxi cabs, the service industry, in the streets, almost no one I saw was a Qatari citizen. Many of the people doing the jobs were from the continent of Africa, or they were from the Philippines, etc. But then when I spoke to people, many people talked about being brought there, as you described, for labor, Oftentimes they were sponsored by people, meaning that someone said, look, I'll pay your airfare or however you get here. I'll pay for your housing up front and you will work it off. But while the average Qatari citizen is paid an extraordinary amount, the average household income in Qatar is great for citizens. For non-citizens, it's incredibly low. And so what we end up seeing, it seems to me, is almost a kind of modern day slavery. Is it too extreme a claim to make that these people who are being brought there to as indentured servants or as laborers are almost approaching slavery?
Yeah, I mean the blogger Noah that you referred to that is linked to has been linked to Malcolm Bidali has documented in great detail really how difficult it is, and I think there are two reasons. People choose to go to Qatar. They are lured by the promise of better salaries, and when they arrive there, they find that actually, in many cases, the salaries that are promised are not the salaries that they receive. They have their passport seized, so they cannot leave their employers, and their employment is tied. Their stay in the country or their visas are tied essentially to working with the employers that they've been sent to work for. And in many ways, what it does do is create this, I think, kind of almost like chattel slavery conditions for many people. And I think that's the major concern that we've had in the case of Malcolm Bidali and many others. And of course, there are cases where people may have been trafficked or essentially duped into going into the kingdom with the promise of a better life, and then find that actually what they have is semi-slavery conditions. So these two routes are both a matter of concern. And the International Labour Organization and the UN Rapporteur on xenophobia and racism has raised major concerns with the Qatari government on these issues, and I hope that they will address them way before the FIFA World Cup that's coming up. Of course, the World Cup is the world's biggest football event. It affects hundreds, tens of countries across the world, and it is worth $200 billion to the kingdom. So it is important that the stadiums that are being built, and many of them will be built by Filipinos, Pakistanis, Kenyans, and others, that they are accorded the very high levels of labor rights that are expected internationally. So it is not acceptable to build a world-class international event on the back of these kind of conditions.
Unfortunately, it appears that that's exactly what is happening. And what we need, as you pointed out, is international spotlight, international sanctions, international rebuke, some form of resistance to this. Hopefully, the UN and other institutions will be able to apply more pressure than they have in other comparable circumstances. But we're going to keep our attention on this. And of course, I know that Amnesty International, as always, will keep its sights set on these types of conditions so that we can reform them, so that we can change them, and so we can create a world filled with justice and safety for everybody. I appreciate the insight you provided, Irũngũ. Please come back soon. Everybody stay with